In a interesting turn of events, the state of Florida has decided to cancel the Democrat primary for 2024. Just nixed it. Just nixed it. Florida is doing its own thing. Florida said we are not going to hold a Democrat primary. Now, what does that mean for the other candidates that are running in the Democrat race? What does that mean for Dean Phillips, Marianne Williamson, and Cenk Uygur? We know Cenk Uygur has his own issue because he wasn't born in the United States, which he says that he is going to challenge via the Supreme Court. I do not think a conservative Supreme Court is going to grant Cenk this wish. They probably won't even entertain that piece of legislation or that form, because the Supreme Court gets so many cases presented to them on a weekly basis. I don't think they're going to consider that to be a priority. Okay. There are more pressing issues that are sent to the Supreme Court. But get a load of this, because this is a doozy. Florida Democrats plan to cancel presidential primary, enraging Dean Phillips' campaign. Oh, Dean. Oh, you're so gullible, Dean. Let's go on here. Florida appears poised to hold no presidential primary election for Democrats this cycle after the state party submitted only President Joe Biden's name as a candidate up for nomination. The move to leave Representative Dean Phillips off the primary ballot left the Minnesota Democrat enraged on Thursday. In a statement first provided to Politico, Phillips, who has launched a primary shot against Joe Biden, accused the Florida Democratic Party officials of rigging the primary. Well, you don't say. They did this to Bernie Sanders in 2016. You know, it's just, we called this, he threatened a lawsuit and a convention fight if he didn't win ballot access in the state. He threatened a lawsuit and a convention fight. We had a lawsuit after 2016, the DNC fraud lawsuit. Some of you have been with me for a while. I interviewed the lawyers that actually started that lawsuit on the show a while back, right? The Becks. And it became very clear to me that at the end of the day, you are wasting your time with this. You are wasting your time with this lawsuit. Number one, that's going to cost money, right? I don't know how much money Dean has, but it does cost money. But one thing the Becks made it very clear to me is that after everything that they went through, and they weren't even trying to have anything overturned. They weren't trying to make it so that Bernie Sanders won. They just wanted to be able to get all of those individual, donors that donated to Bernie's campaign, those small dollar donations, a lot of working class people. They just wanted to be able to give those people their money back. Anyhow, the judge ruled in favor of the DNC. And what that judge was able to prove, thanks to attorney Bruce Spiva, well, not thank you, Bruce, but the DNC thanks him. The DNC attorney, Bruce Spiva, was able to prove that the Democratic Party, first of all, the DNC is a corporate thing. It's a corporation. So I'll pull up that statement in just a second from Bruce Spiva, but I just want to remind you of what happened when we tried to do this before with the lawsuit. Let's continue. Americans would expect to see the absence of democracy in Tehran, not Tallahassee, said Phillips. The intentional disenfranchisement of voters runs counter to everything for which our Democratic Party and country stand. Our mission as Democrats is to defeat authoritarians, not become them. This is another example of the Democratic Party also being fascist. The Phillips campaign complaint is rooted in the process by which candidates get on the ballot in Florida. Under state law, it is left up to the parties to decide who makes the primary ballot. The deadline for parties to submit a list of approved candidates to state election officials is Thursday, but Florida Democrats acted before then, sending a notice on November 1st to the state that Biden is the only primary candidate. Phillips had entered the race a few days earlier, and self-help guru Marianne Williamson had been campaigning for months by then. Under state law, if a party only signs off on one candidate for the primary ballot, the contest is not held. Florida's primary is held March 19th, which puts it in line behind Super Tuesday and several other large states as California and Texas. It is expected to allocate 250 delegates. Here's something to think about. What happens if other states decide to follow Florida's lead? What happens if the Democratic Party in other states decide we are only going to put forth Joe Biden as the primary candidate for the Democratic Party? What happens? We could be looking at a potential domino effect. This part's interesting here. In his statement, Phillips called the handling of the process by Florida Democrats a blatant act of electoral corruption and demanded Biden condemn and immediately address it. The Biden campaign did not comment for this story. Of course they did not. Of course they did not. This is Bernie Sanders 2016 all over again. Now, Cenk Uygur and Marianne Williamson actually did meet about this virtually, discussing this issue and what the next step forward will be. They actually had audience members ask questions too. So I thought that was pretty interesting, asking like, what is the process going forward? Now, they say that they intend to fight this. But again, I've seen this before. I have seen this before, and I just don't know. My recommendation to Marianne Williamson, Cenk Uygur, and Dean Phillips is to leave the Democratic Party and to all run as independents. Cenk, I don't really know what's happening with you, because you weren't born here, so that is a thing. That is a real thing. But I've said this earlier on. I said that Marianne Williamson and Dean Phillips should be running as independents, not through the Democratic Party. Let's get into this discussion that Cenk and Marianne had about what they plan to do going forward.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the press conference. My name is Carlos Cardona, and I'm the campaign manager for Marianne Williamson 2024 for president. And so with us today is Kara Eastman, the campaign manager for Cenk.
We're moving forward. We're just going to get to Cenk and Marianne. Here we go. Right about there.
In the state of Florida, they did several absurd things there at the Democratic Party. Let's talk about it, and then obviously we'll take questions. I'll go first, Marianne will go second, and then we'll take your questions. So they gave us no notice, any of the candidates, as to when they would be having a meeting to discuss which candidates could go on the ballot. And I want the press to understand, this is really important, we're in all of the other states. All three of the campaigns are working diligently on getting on the ballots everywhere. So we're aware of the rules of the different states. We're all trying very, very hard to abide by those rules. And I think we're doing a great job. We spend a lot of time and energy in all three of the campaigns trying to make sure that we know when the deadlines are, what the requirements are. There are often signature requirements, financial requirements, forms, etc. And it's basically our number one task because it's one of the bigger challenges in this campaign. And so with all the other states up until now, there's been a relatively fair process. And now we could argue about whether we agree or disagree with the decisions that they've made in regards to who's on the ballot or not. And I would probably have the largest disagreements out of the three of us for sure on getting included or not included in some of the ballots. But this is not about that. And this is definitely not about my naturalized citizen issue. This is about all three of us being excluded in a way that was absurd, ridiculous, counterproductive, done obviously in secret, obviously to help the incumbent Joe Biden, and needs to be reversed. So
let's pause here for a second because I want to comment on something that he said about the deadlines. So Cenk Uygur said that we are aware of the deadlines in all the different states. That's great. However, the reality is it doesn't matter if you're aware of the deadlines in all the different states. They can change the rules just as like what Florida's doing now. Remember, they can change the rules. They are a corporation. They don't have to, we'll get into that in a second, but I just wanted to say that it doesn't matter if you knew when the deadlines were. They can change things.
We have sent in a letter saying that they should include our names in the list that they are giving to the Secretary of State today. We'll, of course, see how that plays out. And we give them every opportunity to do the right thing, and we'd be thrilled if they did the right thing. And we believe in democracy. We believe in letting the Democratic voters decide. And the number one problem with what the Florida Democratic Party is doing is not how it affects me, Marianne, and Dean. It's how it affects the Florida Democratic voters. They are robbing them of their voice. They're saying that democracy is not important, that you should not participate in the process. And we don't care what you think. We don't.
And this is where I say, if it were me, I'm not voting Democrat or Republican, so whatever it is, what it is. But if it were me and I were a Democrat in Florida, then I would try to rally as many Democrat voters that I know and push back on this. This is where I think the voters should actually get together and form some type of coalition and push back against the decision that has been made here. Guys, March is actually just around the corner. Can you believe it? Like, March is literally around the corner. We are already towards the end of 2023. So the primary will be here before you know it. And remember, there is no Democrat primary debate this time around. So this is going to be very, very different.
I don't care if you support the incumbent, don't support the incumbent, whether you want to do a vote for one of the other candidates that you find to be compelling, a candidate that is closer to your point of view, a candidate that you think has a better chance of winning, etc. We are just going to be authoritarian, and we're going to do this in the dark of night. And their excuses, of course, have been comical. And all three of us are perfectly aware of the rules in every other state, and we have asked repeatedly the state of Florida through our campaigns what the rules are here so that we could abide by them. They never returned our calls or our emails to any of the campaigns. And then the day before the deadline, they say, oh, by the way, we made this decision. Not only did we make this decision, we made it a month ago, but we never let any of you guys know.
It doesn't matter if you know what the rules are. It does not matter. They can change the rules. They can change. We'll go ahead and pull that up now, and I'll come back to that discussion. But I just want to show you again, because this cannot be said enough, right? And I know some of you have been with me for a long time. You're like, how many times is she going to show this on the show? But there are new viewers. But I have to continue to stress this as much as possible. This is what attorney Bruce Spiva said in order to actually give the DNC the win during the Bernie Sanders, that fraud lawsuit. This is what people need to understand about the DNC. Thank you, Theron, for sharing this. According to the DNC attorney, Bruce Spiva, there's no such thing as a Democrat. Let's get to it. DNC attorney Bruce Spiva, this is what he was able to argue in court. There is no such thing as a Democrat. The DNC just encourages people to vote for the Democratic Party. No one has a right to an expectation of a fair election. Let me say this again. No one has the right to an expectation of a fair election. Like, this is just plain and simple, folks. It goes on to say, if the DNC wishes to select a candidate in the primaries instead of a free election process, that is their right. Sounds like to me, the state of Florida, the Democrats in Florida have decided to select Joe Biden as their candidate for the primary. So they can do this. 3, donating money to Bernie Sanders doesn't mean you thought that money was going to assist him to win the primary. You have no right to think the DNC was obligated to follow their own charter and internal policies about elections. So they don't even have to follow their own charter. Can't be said enough, folks. And 4, discussion of and any disputes with the DNC do not belong in a transparent process in a court of law. Why is that piece important? Obviously, what Cenk Uygur is telling you, it appears that in reference to Florida, they tried not to be transparent with people like Marianne and Dean and Cenk Uygur. And of course, that was intentional. But according to what was ruled by the courts, and what Bruce was able to prove, they don't owe you transparency. Goes on to say, the DNC is a private association, which should never be asked to engage in the discovery process or have to reveal any of its internal workings or strategies should they decide to select a candidate rather than allow a fair election of a candidate. And that is exactly what Florida has decided to do. So they can go forward with a lawsuit if they want to. But like I said, we've been through this before. And my whole thing is they'll probably argue that same sentiment that I just read you there. Legally, apparently, they actually don't owe you any transparency, and they can select the candidate if they want to. This is why I said it is a waste of time running through the Democratic Party. Let's get back to the video.
Come on. There's no way in the world to interpret that in any way other than bad intent. But finally, from my point of view, and again, I'm super happy to take questions. Actually, there's 2 last things I'll say. One is if they don't do the thing that we're asking for, we, of course, then will have to take further actions. And one of the actions that we're definitively going to take is that we're going to do an implementation challenge, both for the Florida Democratic Party and the DNC, and try to get them to actually follow their own rules and bylaws, because we are correct. This Florida Democratic Party is incorrect in how they have applied these rules. And so that implementation challenge has succeeded before. It will likely succeed in this case as well if we have to go to it. And it's just flat out embarrassing for the Florida Democratic leadership that they need to be forced into following their own rules. And then finally, I don't understand the logic of what they've done here. I mean, they've bungled it so thoroughly. According to the Florida laws, if there's only one person on the ballot, there's no person on the ballot, and there is no election at all. Well, in that case, I don't know why anyone is assuming that Joe Biden would get those delegates. By definition, there's no election. No one won. There's no one on the ballot. So I hereby claim all of those delegates. Okay, now Marianne can also claim those delegates. And do you know how we would sort that out? We'd have an election. That's how we would sort it out. Okay. But if you're not going to hold an election, there's no way in the world Joe Biden has those delegates. That's not a thing where you say, oh, we didn't hold an election, but we have just picked the one person in the state of Florida, presumably Nikki Fried, has picked who the candidate is going to be. No, that's not how it works. That's not how it works according to your own rules. That's not how it works according to the DNC. And that's not how it works in a democracy. And the Democratic Party should be the biggest advocate and champion of democracy, especially at a moment like this.
Why would the Democratic Party be the biggest, champion of democracy if it's bought by corporations? I mean, obviously, if you looked at exit polls from 2020, most of the Democratic voters actually did support something like Medicare for all, right? But most of them didn't vote for Bernie Sanders. So, again, why would they don't actually want to give the people what we want. They don't want the people to actually win anything. This is the part that people really got to understand. This is a corporate party. And the difference is, I think the Republican Party, they don't say they're not corporate. They're not trying to say that they're not. But the Democratic Party likes to give people this illusion that they're not bought and paid for, and that they actually do care about working class people, and that they actually do care about the social justice issues. But again, like, they're bought.
When they say that the other side is challenging democracy at its core, and I believe that. That's why I'm in this race, because I think Trump would destroy democracy. But apparently Nikki Fried's going to beat him to the punch. So let's be honest about what's happening in the state of Florida. Authoritarianism, anti-democratic values, and not what the Democratic Party should stand for. Marianne.
Well, I certainly agree with everything that Cenk said. And I think that the Florida statute itself is unconstitutional, giving that kind of power to the party. The party itself is a political committee. It's not a government agency, but it's playing a quasi-governmental function here. And it has no right to block democracy this way.
I just want to go back to something that Marianne just said. Right about here. Let me just make sure.
Marianne.
Well, I certainly agree with everything that Cenk said. And I think that the Florida statute itself is unconstitutional, giving that kind of power to the party. The party itself is a political committee. It's not a government agency, but it's playing a quasi-governmental function here. And
that part right there. The party itself is not a political committee, or excuse me, a political committee, or it's not a government agency. The party itself it's a corporation, though, and corporations can change their rules. That's the thing. I mean, how many of you work, right? Like, if you ever work for a company has one set of rules, then next year they're like, oh, by the way, we're making some changes here, and there. I mean, come on. How many companies made changes to you're allowed to work from home during the pandemic, whereas before they said, no, you could not work from home. So the thing is, it is a corporation. This is not like an organization that you just join and have friends and hang out, and it's all about money.
It has no right to block democracy this way. It has a responsibility to the public good. And we all know that we're living at a time when our democracy itself is in crisis. We all know that the threats to democracy of them that are represented by people such as Donald Trump. But the irony here, of course, is that the Democratic Party claims to be trying to protect democracy, but their way of doing it is to suppress democracy.
But I don't think any people really believe that the Democratic Party is trying to protect democracy. They're trying to protect corporate interests. That's what the party is trying to do. So I think that when Marianne says, like, they have no right to do this, according to a former DNC attorney, Bruce Spiva, and a federal judge, they do have the right to do it. This is what I want people to fully grasp. According to the ruling from the judge, the DNC has every right to do what they're doing right now. Yes, I know this is not on the national level. This is in the state of Florida, but the Democratic Party in Florida can do what they want, and they know they can. That's why they did it. They know they can change the rules.
It's wrong, and it's also undercutting of the most basic rights. If we cannot assume that the people of the United States have fair and equal access to knowing even who their candidates are, then we don't have fair and equal access to the vote. And this is why this is a transgression of the 14th Amendment. And this is what we will be claiming in court if we have to.
But we already currently don't have fair and equal access to vote. And this has been an issue for quite a long time. If we had fair and equal access to vote, people wouldn't be fighting for voting rights laws, right? That's why people were still fighting for voting rights. That's the thing, is like, this has always been the case as long as I've been alive. It isn't fair. It isn't equal. Everybody doesn't have access to do it. I'd start with the most simple thing that the US government could do tomorrow. Make Election Day a federal holiday where everyone gets that day off so everyone can vote. We don't even have that. In some other countries, they actually do have that. Election Day is a holiday, so everybody can just go to the polls. So if they really wanted everyone that is of voting age to have access to voting, they would make Election Day a holiday. So this has always been an issue. It's never been fair and it's never been equal.
Both Dean, all of us, Dean and Cenk and myself, are going to take all legal action that we can and that we feel is necessary. We're going to communicate to the public, and we appreciate, I know all three of us appreciate that you are here. You know, you can't let these so-called little transgressions pass. We have to hold a line right here. This is not just about the fact that it's 200 and some odd delegates. It's not just the fact that it's drama going on within the Democratic Party. This is the chipping away of our democracy. And as Cenk pointed out, what an irony that the party called the Democratic Party, the party that claims to be the champion of democracy, has basically decided that Joe Biden will be the candidate. Now, this is authoritarianism, just as Cenk said. When I was a child, we were told that in the Soviet Union, people could vote, but they were told who their options were. And that's exactly what's happening here. And you have over 70% of Democratic voters who have made it clear time and time again that they want to hear other options. In this case, other options exist. And at this point, the Democratic Party, the state of Florida itself, have no right to manipulate the circumstances so in such a way that people are denied access to who their candidates are, and to hear from us and to know that we're about. Unfortunately, this is part of a larger concerted effort that the Democratic Party has been taking. This has to do with media suppression. It has to do with invisibilization, erasure, but it stops right here, or at least it will not go unchallenged right here by myself. And I think I hear the same kind of conviction in Cenk's voice. We certainly have heard it from Dean as well. And I'm with him 100%. And all of us will do what we feel we have to do. And I think that we're the ones who are standing up for democracy in this case, not the Democratic Party.
Yeah, it just sounds like a waste of time, money, and resources to me to even try to challenge this legally. Like, I get it, but at the same time, we've done this before. I think they all need to go back and look. And Cenk Uygur knows this because they covered this on TYT. They all need to go back and take a good look at that DNC fraud lawsuit. Why put people through this kind of thing again? You have a very short amount of time because March is, like I said, just around the corner. But the thing is just this does not make any sense. The Democratic Party told you that they're not even going to let you debate, which I think there should be debates. I don't support the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but I think that if there are challengers, especially Marianne and Dean, they're both polling double digits. Not Cenk, but they're both polling double digits. So my whole thing is I think Joe Biden has challengers. There should be a debate. I feel like there should. So, but they won't let you debate. They're either like ignoring some of you on mainstream media. To be honest with you, the third party, get this, okay? The third party and independent candidates are receiving more press and media attention from mainstream media than the challengers in the Democratic Party. This shit is wild. Never thought this would happen, right? All the people who told me, no, the media is going to ignore third party and independent people. And I said, not if it's a big enough name. Turns out I was right. RFK Jr., Cornel West, Jill Stein, they've been receiving a lot of attention from mainstream media. Jill Stein was on CNN. I don't remember CNN trying to bring her on before. So they're getting more of the media attention. So they are honestly, because they realize that they are the bigger threat. They realize that Marianne and Cenk and Dean are not, because the DNC already decided that Joe Biden was going to be the nominee. So they can just look over you guys.
Okay, we're happy to take questions here, and the reason that Carlos and Cara are on, and Cara Eastman's my campaign manager, and she was a Democratic candidate in Nebraska, nearly beat Don Bacon, and I'm awfully proud of that, and maybe one day again. Okay, but they're on because they were the people who corresponded with the Florida Democratic Party more so than we did. And so in case there's any details or questions that you want to ask about that, they might be able to answer them as well.
Hi.
So this question is important. I do want you guys to hear this one.
Isabella Murray with ABC here. Just wondering what the timeline would be as far as legal action goes. And if you've communicated with the Florida Democrats since you've all been making these statements.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the timeline is not great here. They were supposed to submit names to the Florida Secretary of State yesterday. And we asked them to submit our names in a letter that we sent them yesterday. Now, why did we send it yesterday? That's because they let us know the day before. And it's a very fair and good question that you guys should ask them. Hey, if this was meant with good intent, why did you keep it secret until the day before you're supposed to submit the names? And especially if you say you voted on October 29th, especially given that all three campaigns contacted the Florida Democratic Party repeatedly, probably a combination of dozens of times, and you didn't respond to them at all until the very last day. And then you told them, oh, by the way, we'd made this decision in the dark of night a month ago. So if no names were submitted to the Secretary of State and there is no election in Florida, which is likely the case at this point, I don't know how they would reverse it when it comes to the relationship between the Florida Democratic Party and the Florida Secretary of State. They have bungled this royally. But I do know that we're definitely going to, once that becomes confirmed, that we will do that implementation challenge through the DNC. But under no circumstances is Joe Biden getting those delegates. If there's no election, no one won. The idea that, well, we decided he won in our heads is not a thing.
I'm sorry, but they'll give it to Joe Biden. They can do that. This has already been decided in court that they can do it. I really do think it's a waste of time, energy, and resources for them to challenge this. But, each to their own, right? Each to their own. What a mess. Like I said, they all should have been running as independents in the first place. We will see what happens. This will be really interesting. Thank you for the super chat, Justin. If Rashida Tlaib leaves the Democratic Party, she should join the Michigan Green Party. That will be even more damaging to the Democrats. Interesting. Thank you, DC. The DNC is officially DNC Services Corporation. This is true. If you look up their address too, I think it says that on the address. Thank you for the super chat, Flower Bro. From the river to the sea, Biden gets no vote for me. Thank you, Justin. Been saying it since 2016. It's an absolute waste of time to think that candidates for the people can get through the Democratic Party primaries. Run green instead. And thank you for the super chat, Flower Bro. From the river to the sea, Biden gets no vote from me. Did I read that twice? Oh, there's two of them. Thank you. I don't know if you meant to send two, but thanks. Thank you, Cool Blue. When all is also said and done, Cenk Uygur and company will endorse Joe Biden and the Democrats during the period of the 2024 general election. Thank you. Yes. And thank you, DC. Voting doesn't matter when fascists count ballots. JB says if everyone had equal access to vote, ex-cons would be able to vote after serving their time. Boom. DC says, has the Williamson campaign team even met the criteria for ballot access in a single state? I believe they are on the ballot in New Hampshire. I believe they've completed that. And thank you for the super chat, Philip. With business law, they advertised there would be a process. Candidates spent cash based on advertised rules. Ads are a contract. DNC committed fraud.